They are feeling completely desolate about the idea of how they're going to perform, the Conservatives, in that election, and that Theresa May should go before those elections take place.
I think a very important point here is that if you change the pilot, you don't change the weather. So if the Prime Minister were to go tomorrow, the numbers would all be the same. We would still not have a majority in the House of Commons. We would still have to pursue our negotiations with Labour in the pursuit of a majority. We would still have a split Parliament that wanted all sorts of different things, from a second referendum to rejoining or not leaving the European Union at all, to going out without a deal and so on. So I think what matters now is that we give the Prime Minister that time. She has said that the week beginning the 3rd of June, she will come back with the withdrawal bill and to continue those discussions with Labour, both now and also after the European elections in around a week's time, in terms of trying to bring a deal across the line. And that means continuing in earnest those discussions with the Labour front bench, seeing where we can get with that, getting beyond the European elections, bringing the withdrawal bill back and continuing to push to get the best possible outcome, which has to be a negotiated deal and is good for business and jobs and industry and the wealth and well-being of our country.
Minister, if you put your hand on your heart and actually are as honest as you possibly can be as a member of the government with our viewers, what is it that you think is going to change between now and the next time MPs vote on this deal?
Is that how you see it, Kirsty, that poor performance of those two parties will suddenly focus minds?
Do you know, I think there will be a poor performance of those parties, but I think if you look at the swell of public opinion, you know, in the European Union referendum in 2016, Leave won by a majority, but not a very big majority. If you look at the direction of travel in public opinion, people are moving against Brexit. People I speak to are not unhappy that the Conservatives haven't delivered Brexit. They're unhappy that Brexit is happening at all. And throughout all of this, you know, people of Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain. Now, Labour and Conservatives cannot stand up in that House of Commons and say that they are representing the people of Scotland when they have done everything they possibly can to ignore the will of the Scottish people and the will of the Scottish Parliament. So I don't see how either of those parties can be making any kind of comeback in Scotland in the near future.
Worth saying that, Kirsty, of course, 40% of people in Scotland did vote to leave. So it is not the case that every single person in Scotland wants there to be a... Yeah, forgive me, 38% wants actually this whole thing to be reversed and to stay in the European Union. But in the context of what is happening with the government bringing back their bill, is there any chance at all that SNP MPs might even consider abstaining to allow it to proceed, or is there's a door firmly shut? This is what makes a difference to the numbers.
We voted against Article 50 being put in the first place. We've voted against Theresa May's deal at every opportunity. We'll be voting against the Withdrawal Agreement bill because any Brexit is bad for our constituents.
How would you characterise the talks at this stage, Tony, Lloyd? Because Mel Stride obviously thinks there is a glimmer of hope of an agreement.
Well, I wish I could see that glimmer. The real problem is that on all these occasions, yes, of course, there are some areas where the government has moved a little bit, but it is a little bit. On the substantive issues that we've said all the way through, and let me take the Northern Ireland perspective. No hard border across Northern Ireland means there needs to be a customs agreement, there needs to be single market standards. Now, unless we can see, and we haven't seen, movement on that substantive issue, the Prime Minister has no chance of assembling a majority in the United Kingdom Parliament. Now, in that sense, I'm not sure what she's there for. The problem for us, though, is something even deeper. Let's say tomorrow that the Prime Minister really does move in the direction I've just outlined. Let's say that we even could contemplate some kind of deal that could be put to Parliament. The Conservative Party will dispatch the Prime Minister very shortly. They will elect, I don't know whom, but it's probably going to be somebody who wants to ape Mr Farage, so a Faragist Tory. A Faragist Tory is not going to commit to honouring, during the leadership campaign, the things that the present Prime Minister will have negotiated with Labour. So we've got a genuine dilemma now. I don't know whether it's better to have an even more difficult Prime Minister in Downing Street or the Prime Minister we've got, because actually we've got now 10 working weeks, if you take out the recess, 10 working weeks before we potentially crash out of the European Union.
try and persuade Tony
Well,
Lloyd. You say that you are
I would-
relying on two things: a poor performance in the European elections that will focus people's
saying
minds,
relying on it,
but you think that is what will happen,
Expecting.
and you have got to rely on Labour to come in behind you on this deal.
Well, what I would say to Tony is he's in the same position as we are as a party, because this is the two main parties, and there are many, many Labour voters, particularly up in the north of our country and some of the towns and cities up in the north, who are heavily in favour of Brexit, who are deeply frustrated with the Labour Party, who basically have tried to ride two horses, OK? So on the one hand, they're saying, oh, we're in favour of leaving. On the other hand, they're saying, well, we might give you a second referendum. Oh, no, we won't. Oh, maybe we will.
But, you know, Joe, I mean, I may remind Mel, you know, by my accent, you might recognise I have heard of the north of England.
Of course, and nobody suggested, Tony, that you had.
And represent a seat that voted by majority in favour of Brexit. But look, what my constituents want and what my constituents need is a solution to this that puts jobs first, that begins to establish a way forward that's in the national interest. This isn't about religious ideology. This is about a very practical decision of how we get now assemble a majority in Parliament. I would look to the SNP to support something that can move the nation forward. They might not agree with every aspect of this, but we cannot allow this country of ours to crash out of the European Union. We cannot allow the right wing of the Conservative Party to pull the Tory party even further to the right.
It's a bit cheeky to say that, given that your party's policy is for a second EU referendum. But despite the fact that that's your party's policy, you're not actually willing to back that. That would get people out of this mess. That would end up in a situation where we could have the Prime Minister's deal versus Remain. We could have the settled will of the people voting, I would hope, for Remain, and we could remain in the EU.
We've made it very clear the circumstances under which we'd vote for a second referendum.
If you're not getting a general election, which you're not getting at this moment in time.
Well, on the compromise, will you make a second referendum the price of agreeing to Theresa May's deal?
Well, we've made it very clear that if we've said Theresa's made deal, let me spell this out, Theresa's deal is a bad deal. We've said a bad Conservative deal would trigger us demanding a second referendum.
Right.
So does that mean that you will start at some point clearly pushing for a second referendum? That will be your...
It means just what I just said.
We have now got Tory MPs standing up demanding Theresa May goes. We've got Conservative leadership campaigns being fired off every which way you look, and every member of the Cabinet being asked, and others, ministers, if they're going to run for the leadership. I mean, how much longer can this go on?
Well, I mean, that is the question that everybody you bump into Westminster asks. And it is, people involved in the talks are very aware that it is one of the big dynamics. I mean, that is such a kind of fragile administration. As Tony suggests, there is a really real question. Is it worth Labour agreeing anything when there is a target on the Prime Minister's back?